Good day, everyone. How are you doing at day 2 of ChangeNOW? Still alive and kicking, hopefully. Yeah, maybe you have an afternoon dip and there will be no snacks here, but there is definitely gonna be some food for thought during this session on circular economy, where we'll discuss sending overconsumption to the bin. My name is Snoeck and I'm a Belgium-based host and moderator, and I'm so glad that we will discuss some key levers for reducing resources and product overconsumption, a crucial step in lowering our negative environmental impacts. And this session will consist of 3 parts. We'll first listen to the keynote of an innovation waste manager, Szaky. Then we'll have Eva Gladek and Martijn Lopes Cardozo on stage for a panel discussion. And the third part will be about a collaboration in the textile industry sphere. At least I hope that you will stay with us during the whole session. First things first, the keynote of Szaky. His name might ring a bell for quite a lot of people because, as I said before, he's some innovation waste manager. He's a true pioneer in that area. And he's the founder of 2 companies. First of all, there's TerraCycle, and he will tell us a little bit more on how they manage waste, but also how we can recycle better and how we can use more recycled content, and especially how can we reuse less. But for Tom, it doesn't end with recycling. He really wants to close the loop, and therefore he founded a company called Lopes in 2019, and he will tell us more about the lessons that he learned from launching in 6 different countries and what are the key ingredients to scale reuse. So we're really curious to hear all about it. So give him a big round of applause for Szaky.
So it's a real pleasure to be with you today to talk about my favorite topic in the world, which is waste. To give a context on what we have learned and what works in the world of recycling, I hope we can get the presentation up in a moment there on the screen. I want to tell you sort of our journey around waste and what have been the key learnings throughout, because they all compound to how can we make ambitious projects like reuse really scale. Now, the first thing I want to highlight for you is we operate here in France, but 21 countries around the world. And one of the interesting things we've noticed is in wealthy countries like France or Canada or other markets, we're able to operate as a for-profit company. In emerging countries like Thailand, which is why you see it there in blue, we operate as a non-profit organization. The key lesson I've learned in this space around circular economy is that it's all about money flow. Why things are not circular is about money flow. How to get them to be circular is about money flow. And money flows in a wildly different way in wealthy versus emerging markets. Now, we talk a lot in the world of circular economy about what things are made from, right? It's almost the primary question. Should it be glass or should it be fiber or polymer? And today, I would argue, we're in this great fiberization moment. Many package forms are moving into paper and fiber-based solutions. And it's interesting to watch this because I would argue these are not the foundational questions we should be asking. Shouldn't we ask what systems these materials move in? And is the system honoring the material? And when I mean honoring, that means that we're not requiring more extraction to occur. Because when you look at the impact of any material type, extraction is the primary environmental impact from any indicator that is out there, and that is what we really need to avoid. So as we think about open systems, the first step in moving from a linear system to a closed one is to think about the world of recycling. And the key question here is what really drives recyclability? Imagine if you in this audience saw a coin just on the floor. What would be the biggest coin that would get you to step out of your seat and go pick it up? Let's say you said, it would be a 20-cent euro coin. Why would you not go for a smaller coin? And the reason you probably wouldn't is your cost of stepping up and collecting it and your cost of processing it is too high and it's not worth it. All coins are money, but there's many coins we're going to leave on the ground. And it's the exact same thing with waste. Certain waste streams, we bother collecting and recycling in open systems because they are profitable to do so. And other waste streams, we don't bother. We in fact pay people to dispose them because they cost more to collect and process than they're worth. You know, most of the time in the recycling world, people ask about, can technically something occur? Can technically something compost? Can technically it be recycled? And it's an irrelevant question. The only question that is important is, will something happen? And on the will something happen side, the only driver of that is, can the company who is doing it make money? The reason, for example, most composters don't like compostable packaging is because they lose money when they interact with it. The reason a product, if it's too small or too complicated, made from multiple materials, is challenging for recyclers is that it costs more to collect and process than the results are worth. That is the essence of, in open systems, what drives circularity. So what can you do, right? You can make your products out of more expensive materials that will intrinsically build circularity into them, but the products will become more expensive. You can have governments create taxes, like extended producer responsibility taxes, that fuel these systems. On what we do with voluntary systems, this is our overall equation. You know, you have to have someone pay to cover the cost of what it costs to collect and process something minus what it's worth. The secret to the equation is not that, by the way. That's the intuitive aspect. To get companies to voluntarily lean in and really scale programs, it's the relationship between the last two circles. How do you show them that there's more value that they're going to get? Not from the material, but from creating these systems, then the cost, and then these systems can flourish. And we've been able to, there's no waste stream that is excluded from this, whether it's cigarette recycling, already 1 billion cigarettes have been collected and recycled, whether it's PPE, whether it's dirty diapers in France or Holland or Japan, whether it's tights or contact lenses, hundreds of millions per year recycled through systems like this. Toy recycling in Australia, or oral care recycling in the UK. It goes on, and there's no limit, whether it's recycling at hospitals in France or high-end luxury boutiques in China, whether it's blister pack recycling or shoes and objects, pet food bags, and even systems you can see here at retailers, and large examples. In the end, it's the money flow that you really need to think about. So when you create an object, don't ask what it could do, but ask the system that you're putting it in on what it will do, and how can you adjust that, especially from the monetary point of view. Now that gets the system bent a little bit. But the next part in the recycling circular economy is that we also have to make our products from waste. And that's a very different question than, can it be recycled? They actually have nothing to do with each other. Isn't it interesting that if producers are using a material like PET, that's the same material a soda bottle is made from, whether they're making a backpack, a t-shirt, a shampoo bottle, whatever it may be, if they're using recycled content, the input is almost always soda bottles. It's not t-shirts from t-shirts, it's not shampoo bottles from shampoo bottles, it's almost always soda bottles. And it comes to the same foundational tension of economics, because why do we do this? It's because we design products from a virgin mentality. That is to say, we design products from what virgin materials are able to do. And then later we think about substituting in recycled materials. And the only recycled material that behaves like virgin characteristically in price and performance are beverage containers. But the problem is, you know, once you make a beverage container into a t-shirt, you can't make that t-shirt into a beverage container or a shampoo bottle or whatever it may be. So when we work with organizations, we think about how can we create foundationally closed systems. This is the world's first pen from used pens. Or the shoe I'm wearing is a shoe that we made for the Olympics here in Paris that is made from itself. But to truly integrate closed systems, the shoe had to be fully redesigned so that it could be taken apart and foundationally put back into itself. We had a fun moment here actually in Paris when the Olympics occurred, because we also were the company who collected all the raw material from beaches and rivers in France to build the podiums. So when a Japanese athlete or an Australian athlete won the medal, they were wearing this shoe on a podium, also made entirely from waste collected here in the aquatic systems. So then we get to a little taste of what fuels a circular economy of recycling. The key essence is it's the economic flow that is the most important to think about. But then the next question is, how do we compress this into a circular economy of reuse? When we first started this question, and our entire sort of journey on reuse, which began in 2017, we asked ourselves, why did the world change from how it used to be? Most of the world up until the 1950s was in reusable systems. Our clothing was reused, you know, we cobbled our shoes, we darned our socks, we mended our clothing, which is why we consumed very few garments per year. And the same came in consumables. And the first idea that became really interesting to us is the package back in these models was an asset to the manufacturer. The manufacturer was motivated to make it long-lasting and durable. It was their problem if it broke. And it was their advantage if it was able to withstand many, many uses. And then a really strange moment happened in the 1950s, which is really when the idea of garbage was invented. This is a positive photo from the 1950s celebrating the incredible convenience of disposability. No longer do you have to wash anything, no longer do you have to reuse anything, you can just throw it all away. And I know it looks as a horrific photo today, but I would encourage you to empathize with why the actors in this photo are smiling, because it was authentic. And by the way, it still wins today. Think about how much disposable consumption we have voted for while we've been here today. If you took a cup of coffee, we voted for it, right? In a sustainability environment, we're voting for it, constantly. But it's easy to vilify disposability. I think the important component is to think about the dynamics that shifted and what are its virtues. Its foundational virtue is convenience and affordability. It's super cheap and super convenient, right? That's why it wins all the time. But a really strange thing happened. The package became a cost to the manufacturer, a cost of goods sold, and as such became our property, which of course we don't want it to be. And so the first thought we had on Loop was, wait a minute, if we move from disposable package forms, where every day they are cheaper tomorrow than today, back into package forms that are an asset, we can amazingly elevate packaging and make it so much more exciting and reusable at the very same time. And we thought, let's go begin with brands. We went to all of our partners, 200 of the world's biggest consumer product companies joined, and produced packaging like this. Everything here you see is real and was all made, whether it's with Nestle or Unilever, whether it's with Clorox for white packaging, all the way to ice cream packaging. And I would argue, that's the most beautiful ice cream package in the planet today. Or this is the most beautiful way to package this soap. It absolutely worked, and it showed that you can elevate packaging and really redefine the economic boundary, because instead of this cost of this package being impregnated into the product at 100% on every use, it is simply the depreciation of the package and the cost of cycling it, collecting it and cleaning it that is impregnated into the product. So you can elevate in a wonderful way. Then we said, well, okay, what do we need next once this can function from the producers? And we realized we need a model that is as close to as convenient for consumers as possible to disposability. Instead of vilifying disposability, let's put it on a pedestal and try to get as close to it as absolutely possible. Make reuse feel like disposable consumption, because that's how we think we can get the masses to adopt such an idea. So we said a key to that is to create a system where you can buy anywhere and return anywhere. Buy a bottle of soda from Carrefour and drop it off at Lidl, and then buy like a shampoo bottle at Lidl and drop it off at Systemu, and so on. And simply speaking, you get products that you purchase, you pay a deposit on, you drop it off at any retailer, and then it gets sorted, cleaned, and back it goes. Now, when we went to the retailers all around the world, in Canada, in the US, in the UK, France, and Japan, those are the 5 countries we decided to take experiments in, they all said, we need to understand if our consumer cares about this. Does the mass market consumer, is this something they're going to resonate with? So we began by launching online pilots all over the world. Again, in those countries, in Asia, Europe, and in North America, with all the biggest retailers in those countries. Here in France, it was with Carrefour, a website called Ma Boutique Loop, where online you could then buy these products and return them. After that worked, and by the way, the most interesting learning in this, because in many global companies would say, oh, sustainability matters to Europeans, but doesn't matter to Americans as much. You could not tell the difference between a French consumer, a Japanese consumer, an American consumer. The response was identical. And I think that's so important as we think about, especially if you're a global organization. Maybe the regulations are different in France versus, say, the US. Maybe the political environment is different, but the consumers behave the same. They really foundationally do. So once this worked, we said, let's turn this off and focus on bringing this into in-store environments because we don't want to be a retailer. So we took this and we transitioned it to a number of in-store pilots, over 40 in-store pilots all over the world with the leading brands and biggest retailers. And this is where the biggest lesson for me emerged. Every single place we got it up and running, operationally functions, we're able to loop even complicated things like baby food and pass the health and safety requirements of large baby food providers, shampoo, laundry detergent, anything, it worked. And the consumers behaved. But we couldn't move out of pilot. We really struggled with, every retailer basically said, we'll continue to learn and learn and learn, but we will only move out of pilot when there's regulatory risk that is going to force us to do so. And why? Why does it require regulatory risk? And this was a key learning for me. In the end, most in this industry, in consumer products, the business is incrementality, right? If you're a shampoo company, you want to invent the concept of conditioner. And if you're a toothpaste company, you want to invent the concept of mouthwash. Or if you're laundry detergent, let's invent fabric softener. This is how businesses foundationally grow because you create bigger assortments of products to purchase. In reuse, you don't. You make the product better, and there's some added complexity greater than zero. And that will be resisted. There's absolutely no question. So we pushed and we pushed, and there's only one country in the world that decided, let's move out of pilot and really take it to industrial scale, which is France. In France, it has grown phenomenally. It's already in 400 stores, 400 different products, not just beverages, but food, refrigerated, frozen, personal care, home care, OTC pharmaceutical, whether it's in Carrefour or even in shelf, whether it's in Monoprix or Système or many, many other retailers. And it has really thrived. The economics are better in reuse in certain packages than buying it new. So what is different here than anywhere else? And there's three things we discovered that we believe are the cornerstone requirements to make a reuse system scale and not just be a pilot for some PR. There needs to be regulatory risk. Here we have the eject laws, we have PPWR that's going to help quite a bit in Europe, but that is incredibly important. If you're in America, I think states like California or Oregon will have already regulation that's in this approach. But you don't just need a stick, from a regulatory point of view. You need carrots. Carrots are subsidies. Today, the PROs in France, like CTO and others, have to dedicate 5% of their annual revenue to funding reuse, which allows for there to be a subsidy while the models are small and competing head-to-head against very mature models of disposability. But you also need one critical actor, which is the retailer. Remember, the god of the brands, right, is really the retailer, who can move them and use their own carrots and sticks to make sure that there is an ecosystem. And I'll talk about why ecosystems in brands are very important. And then, why does disposability win? It's because it's incredibly convenient, and reuse suffers from chronic inconvenience. So we have to really put convenience on a pedestal and make reuse behave like disposability as close as possible, make it feel like a throwaway system, and not just for the consumer, but for the other actors as well, the producers and the retailers, because if it's inconvenient in supply chain, it's also going to be a very big problem. So let's begin with consumers. The biggest unintuitive lesson in consumers is that consumers don't want to try one reusable product. They need an ecosystem of products to jump in and try and to return. Because in reuse, you have to sell the good, but you also have to get it back. Here's a really interesting experiment that we had with Carrefour, where we looked at express stores in Paris, and on one end, we put 5 products, a couple of water products, some sodas, and a beer. And then in exactly the same type of stores, we put those same products, except the beer, but 30 other products, from Nutella to shampoo and so on and so forth. And if you're in consumer products, you will think that the products on the left should sell much more than the products on the right. And in fact, when there was the assortment, the Coca-Colas and others sold 300% more and returned 600% more. But it's also critical to create convenience for the brands. While we were really seduced by this idea of elevating packaging, the reality is, let's bring reuse to the simplest package forms where you have to make about no changes, whether it's a wine bottle or baby food or gin or chickpeas and so on. And that creates this whole ecosystem of growth. And so the biggest lesson I would leave you with is that if we're going to shift from a disposable system to a system without waste, where reuse, I think, is the foundational answer, we need to encourage the right regulatory landscape, evidenced by where we've failed and where we've succeeded, and it has to be fiercely convenient for absolutely every actor, the consumers, but also the brands and the retailers. With that said, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for your insights on waste. Yeah, so if we keep it up and running, there was no problem. The pilots, they all worked, but it's hard to pass on the pilot project. So what do we need to further implement it? More regulations, subsidies from the government, and a retailer who really takes things seriously. And of course, the convenience for us as consumers and for the brands themselves. That's why my key takeaways from Tom. Nice you shared them with us. At ChangeNOW, we believe in the power of art to inspire positive change, and therefore I would really like to invite some people of the plus petit cirque du monde, Julia Tesson, Eric Matagne and Johnson St. Felix and Florian Cornet, who will bring us a little bit of a circus. Give them a warm round of applause. So that was Florian Cornet from Le Plus Petit Cirque du Monde, an organization who used circus for the development of local communities. She was really juggling with her bike like our following panelists are juggling with circular economy because they're quite some experts on this topic. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. We're about to have a panel discussion on a systemic approach on how we can make a fully closed circular material cycle as the cornerstone of our economy. Let's welcome our following guests on stage. Give them a big round of applause. Eva Gladek and Martijn Lopes Cardozo. Welcome, Martijn and Eva. So nice to have you here. Eva, you were already yesterday on stage. You gave a keynote, but you are the CEO, you're the founder of Metabolic. Could you maybe just shortly introduce us to the system change organization Metabolic?
Yes, very nice to meet all of you and to be here. So Metabolic is indeed a systems change agency based out of Amsterdam, established 13 years ago. In our first year, we built the first circular economy living lab in the city, took a polluted plot of land, retrofitted houseboats that were going to be demolished, and developed a whole strategy for closing the loops locally to demonstrate what was possible. And from that point, we grew into an organization working across scales from applied projects like the Kovel, that project, all the way through to influencing policy, doing advisory work for corporates, and really learning a lot about circularity along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll discuss that later on, especially your experience in Amsterdam. Martijn Lopes, you are from Regeneration.VC.
That's right. Hey guys, Regeneration.VC, I'm serial entrepreneur, did 3 companies in the West Coast, one circular economy, led a foundation, and I now moved to the dark side, investing in circular companies. Early stage, consumer value chains, 1 to 5 million checks, so interested to talk to anybody in the audience later.
Yeah, so simply explained, every company who is into circular economy, you would like to invest in them, and you're also searching for investors.
Yeah, so what we do is we have basically 3 themes, design, use, reuse in consumer value chains, and I always like to have strong branded corporates as offtake or co-investors, so that's how we screen the companies.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk a little bit about the system change towards a circular economy. We heard some nice examples from Tom already. But before we do that, what are the performance characteristics of a fully circular economy, according to from your expertise?
Yeah, thanks. When you think about it, of course, circularity starts with the perspective of materials. And it's always about, if you envision a fully circular economy, comparing that to what we see in nature, like if you're walking through a forest, there's no waste, the leaves all get eaten by insects or mushrooms, etc. So ideally, we would be designing economies that are mimicking that have entirely closed material cycles for as long as possible, indefinitely. But you can also close material loops while creating toxins or while damaging ecosystems, or there's the interaction with economics, etc. So from very early days at Metabolic, we started to define a much more holistic perspective on what circularity is. That indeed you need to close those resource cycles, but do it in a way that does not violate any other environmental, social, economic conditions. So it's really about designing an economy that operates well within the planetary boundaries and delivers value to people in a just way. So that's kind of a more holistic perspective. And it's interesting, I really liked what Tom was saying about how the flow of money is so critical to actually determining what is circular in practice. But you can also turn that around. You can say, well, we need to be designing our systems and our material economies so that they are aligned, so that the money value is sufficient to make sure that we can close the loop on everything. Because right now we're dealing with a very imperfect system where a lot of things are simply designed not to be easily recycled. And there's a lot of stuff we can get into in terms of material stocks and flows. So there's a sign there by the circularity section that talks about how even if you recycled everything in the world right now, you wouldn't be able to displace the demand of new materials. And that's because every year, only a small amount of stuff gets thrown out. A lot of it goes into stock or actually gets dispersed. So paint, you're not going to recycle that because it's applied. Or tires, when they rub off onto the road, they create all sorts of microplastics. We need to actually, if we really want to achieve a circular economy, we need to be thinking at that design level, but we also need to be thinking about the way we deliver services and thinking about dispersible materials versus not dispersible materials and how to connect that to the economics.
Redesigning and more thinking as a service. So you already mentioned tires, and if I understood well, you had a company before Black Bear, and there it was about tires, right? So there you recycled a lot of the materials and you reused them.
Yeah, so there was the company I led for 6 years called Black Bear Carbon. We extracted high quality materials out of tires. And the beauty of that, to Eva's point, actually the economics were excellent. So if you look at a tire, there's steel, there's rubber, but there's also a very valuable material called carbon black. It's basically anything black. So this is carbon black here in your phone. And if you get that material out at a high quality level, you can actually get the tires almost for free, and you can actually compete on all these different markets. So, and that's typically the things we like to invest in, where we feel actually circularity has a superior business model compared to the linear place, driven by resource utilization, resource efficiency, cutting out waste. And I can talk a little bit about the latest investment we did, which I think is a perfect example of that.
But maybe I will go to that later, because I want to ask you. So you said it's about redesign, it's about as a service. So how can we embrace that? How can we convince the people to really implement that circular approach? Because that's the big challenge, no?
Well, to be clear, I actually I think that the kind of as a service thing is a bit of a dogma in the circular economy space. I personally don't think it's always true that if you have something as a service, it's automatically more circular. Because, for example, imagine you have socks, right, as a product, and you don't want to be leasing your socks. They get destroyed. It's better in some cases to have products that are designed to go into very good centralized recovery and recycling systems. Things that are really complex, have a lot of embodied intellectual property value, those are the things that I think are really suitable for designing as a service in the system. And I think building on Tom's point, how do you design systems that are the least friction possible? So really looking at not just the products, but how are we designing our urban centers, our communities, so that actually the high quality of service that we want in terms of access to goods, access to experiences, access to places, are designed in such a way where you don't feel the problem if you have to dispose of something into a central washing system because it's everywhere, or because, or you don't have to take a car because you don't need it. Frankly, we don't have enough materials for everyone to have their own car. That is just a fact. That is a part of circularity on the design limitation side. So there's the kind of demand side and the supply side. And when you're really designing circular systems, you need to consider both, how to optimize so that everyone is getting the highest quality of life with the least friction and the least material used as possible that can then be fully recovered. Am I right?
Yeah,
Using skepticism.
No, let me give you an example of one of the companies you invested in. It's a company called Tulu, T-U-L-U. And if you live in a high-end apartment building and you don't have a lot of square meters, you don't really need all the stuff like a carpet cleaner or like a projector or like a drill. You only want to use them occasionally. So what we did is actually in the lobby, there's a place where you can basically pick up those stuff. They're included in your rent. And for any drill or machine or karaoke machine or whatever it is, it replaces 10 devices that otherwise would have been bought. So massive saving, but also much more convenient, right? Because why do you want to have all that stuff in your home sitting around, right? You don't want to own those stuff. You just want to use them. And what's happening now is actually these landlords, and we partner with the greatest real estate developer, Greystar. The customers now are basically saying, we want a lobby with a concierge, we want a gym, and we want a Tulu. It's part of the convenience. So those are the things that I think are better user experience, better resource efficiency, make a lot of money, and makes lives easier.
That's a great example of exactly the principles I was talking about.
Again, the convenience is super important. According to you, Martijn, how do we embrace that fully? It's hard to understand each other here on stage, right? How do we embrace that fully systemic approach to the circular economy?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it depends a bit on the vantage point. So when I was an entrepreneur and building my own company, frankly, I didn't really care about system change. I just want to solve one specific problem extremely well. And when I got invited to these types of stages, I wanted to tell the story, like Tom did, about why the solution I was proposing worked great. When I was leading a foundation, I think that's where foundation's all about. So for instance, one of the things we did is said, almost 45% of the global emissions is tied to products and materials. But if you look at the capital that flows in, it's only 15%. Can we change that? So we partnered with EIB, with World Bank, with all the large development banks. It took us a year to get everybody in the room. It took us one other year to convince people that it was a problem. And then one more year to define a definition on circularity and how do you measure it. So that's what systemic change looks like. And I think from an investor perspective, we take a bit of a different approach. Is we believe that creating these really interesting companies that challenge the status quo and develop role models that other people can look at are the elements for systemic change. But we cannot afford, running those long projects. I think it really depends on where are you in the value chain and what can you do. Eva?
Yeah, thanks, Martijn. I think that you took the hard way to try systemic change. I mean, I know that a lot of the time it can look like that, these complex negotiations, bringing all these people who it's difficult to align their schedules into a room. But I think that actually the way that I like to look at systemic change is that you have, let's say, a whole sector, right? Like, let's say the automotive sector or whatever, packaging. And in order to transform it from state A, where it's linear, fossil fuel-based, degenerative, et cetera, to state B, which is circular, regenerative, there are a lot of different things that need to happen at the same time or in sequence. And for me, systemic change can happen if you really bring together a kind of orchestration path, also that can be entirely private sector oriented, but that you say, okay, well, we're missing a technology here, we're missing a market here, we're missing some regulatory stuff here. So there's actually a whole movement now around systemic finance, which is really saying, okay, let's map out that change and let's see where we can flow private capital as quickly as possible, maybe in tranches. So first to say, let's do the more concessionary stuff that returns-based capital won't finance. And once we've created those enabling conditions, then we can start to finance the more returns-oriented technologies or efforts that will then improve your return profile as an investor. culture. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with systemic change and what it makes me excited about it. And you can apply it in two places, either across sectors or in places like regions or cities where you have like a whole intersecting group of actors. And that maybe connects to the questions around Amsterdam that you wanted to raise.
Yeah, because cities, they're only 3% of the space on Earth, but yet a lot of pollution is produced in the cities. So that's your main focus right now, right? The urban areas.
Well, not quite. So we have a long history of working in transforming cities and developing circular economy strategies for cities. But we're now more focused on looking at broader definitions of place. So the term we've been using a lot is bioregions. So you look at not just the city, but also the resource areas that it's drawing from, and developing these broader transition strategies and coupling that with capital deployment. But our history came from really taking action in city centers, building living labs in cities, and developing circular economy strategies for those cities, and then seeing them fail to implement them fully because of actually lack of private capital involvement and other actors that were not part of the city's mandate.
Yeah, you really need to get everyone involved. You wanted to add something?
I mean, I like cities, right? If you look at, for instance, how Paris changed in implementing biking and 15-minute city, right? I think you have all witnessed it in the last couple of days. So cities is a nice group of folks who have relatively simple governance, who actually can make change happen more easily than at a global or national or EU level. And the thing is, like, you know, the customers of the politicians are the citizens who live there, right? And they want to be re-elected. So there's a real drive and motivation to do that. And the other thing is cities, you know, compete with each other for getting the best talent in, for getting tourists, for getting things like that. So I think the entity city works really, really well. And I think both Eva and I have worked a lot with cities around the world to make change happen. And as an investor, once you have those cities who have, you know, branded their city as circular, developed the ecosystem, you know, have a number of investors, have maybe also state-owned investors who invest in companies and funds, you start to develop the ecosystem where companies can thrive, which make it also fertile ground for startups and scale-ups and places where we can invest. So that's why in Europe, we're, you know, not only in Amsterdam, but we're also in Copenhagen, because those are very forward-leaning cities,
so in
as
the
it goes
long
with
run,
circularity.
In the long run, it definitely it brings advantages to invest in cities. It's an interesting area to experiment. But how do you get a foot between the door? How do you convince them so that they transcend the idea of this is the city and I'm just responsible for my part and I'm a company, and how do you make them all join the ecosystem of systemic transition towards circular economy?
Well, so let me give an example that's concrete. So we have done a lot in Amsterdam, which I can talk about, but tomorrow I'm going to North Carolina. I'm a little concerned about how things are unfolding there, but we'll see. But we have been working in that region for the last 7 years. 7 years ago, we developed a circular economy strategy for the city of Charlotte, which is one of the main cities in the western part of the state. That resulted in them building this amazing innovation facility called the Innovation Barn, which is like a kind of civic, there's a lot of ventures there, so a lot of like venture building programs, but it's also a place where people experiment with materials. But that place is just it's an urban center. Now we're expanding the program to a bioregional strategy, what I talked about, and we're actually looking at the rural areas where there's a long history of cotton production and fabric and material production. So there's this amazing group called the Industrial Commons, whose goal is to build the end-to-end value chain of cotton and hemp production, processing, turning that into fabric, and clothing, and then actually the full recycling process. And so you need to create the interlinkage between those companies that are working in that whole value chain and all the stuff that's happening in the consumption centers, so the collection companies, the sorting companies. So we're actually looking at creating a whole investable portfolio of all of those different entities and getting some support from the municipal actors as well for some of the initial funding that you need for infrastructure and storage and those kinds of things. So it's really about creating this orchestrated portfolio. And in Amsterdam, we worked on a similar thing, actually, a circular innovation collective focused entirely on textiles, but there we unfortunately didn't have enough traction outside of just the venture ecosystem for this particular project. And that's why I think this other thing that we're doing in North Carolina will have more of the desired effect.
Yeah, because once they said, it was one of you said, once the Americans are in, they're fully in. Europeans say yes, but then afterwards it's no.
Well, we'll see how that continues to evolve now, but yeah, I don't want to say anything bad about Europeans. We have been working in Europe, and Europe continues to take bold steps in exploring, piloting, and experimenting, which is one of the most important things to get things moving. And as you heard, Tom, it's actually out of all those countries that were tried with Loop, France is the one that won, because you need that combination of intervention at the different levels.
At a certain point, you worked together. When you worked for the Circular Economy Foundation, both of you worked together with the city of Amsterdam. What were your experiences there?
Yeah, so Eva and I were both Amsterdam based, and when I was at Circular Economy Foundation, we worked closely together. And I think the interesting thing is that sort of Amsterdam has really integrated it in their in their overall policy. And I think actually in the built environment they took the boldest steps, where they basically decided on when they gave out permits for certain buildings, they required them to be demolished in a circular way and built in a circular way. And I think if the government, which is typically sometimes almost half of the global of the GDP of a country, decides to use their purchasing and permitting and like their core functions and drives adoption of circularity, that's of course a very, very big driver. And that's one of the, I think I really kudos to Amsterdam that they did that.
Mm-hmm. Get the governments along. I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear you on this stage. So if I understood well, really get the government along, and they can make other people enthusiastic about it as well. They can attract more talent. But how else do we really transcend the individual level? How else do we get everyone along?
Well, I want to plug the city of Amsterdam, because I think that they have been actually pretty incredible pioneers in this space. The first circular economy scan strategy that we did for them was actually with Circle Economy, the foundation that Martijn used to run, and it was back in 2013, so a really long time ago. And that really gave them the first picture of what are the resource flows in and out. And they were very supportive of also these on-the-ground experiments. And then they also brought us into this partnership of their own accord, together Metabolic, Circle Economy, and one other organization, to give them unsolicited advice on how to unlock barriers in making things more circular in the city. So that was a pretty incredible thing for them to do. And of course, it's not perfect. And if you talk to all the people in the city who are working on this, they'll talk about how it's going too slow and there's all these barriers, but actually they're really getting things moving. How to get other people along, I think ultimately what I'm talking about is this need, I see a need for a new role, for something like an orchestrator, of a party who is looking at those different systemic elements. And it could be from the finance sector, it can be like a financial institution, or it could be actually someone from the municipal side, but really looking at what are the different things that need to happen to take the system from A, linear, to B, circular, regenerative, equitable, and how do we unblock those barriers systemically, and who do we bring in at the right time, and how do we bring technical capacity and money. That is like a weaving activity, and that actually requires resourcing. And I think that that's one of the problems, that we have no one structurally doing that type of work that requires the integration and the resourcing for that. So we're now starting to really unlock funding to do that type of work, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe it will work.
We need a new stakeholder who brings in a lot of energy to bring all those people together and then launch the circular economy, and everyone will participate.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm arguing for, but we'll see. I don't know, Martijn, you're always skeptical of what I say.
Well, I think it depends a bit on your role, right? So I think as an investor, of course, like it's a little bit like as a garden, right? So there has to be good earth, and there's a lot of seeds, and things grow, and then you watch them, and then when things start to become interesting, that's when you get involved as an investor, right? So you're a bit like, cherry picking to some extent, right? So you're a bit less in the systemic role. At least that's how I view it. But of course, you gravitate towards places where that happens well, right? And I would say, and I think if you even take it in a bigger perspective, if you look at, the rise and wealth of nations and cities, and like the folks who have developed those ecosystems that work together, who have created, vibrant economies, vibrant arts, those attract the best talent, those attract the best investors, those flourish, and it's also the best place to live, right? So I think on that note, I think circular economy has a lot to offer to people, right? It's not, we should all be miserable. It should be, abundance within planetary boundaries, as we call it.
Yeah. We all benefit from it. That's something I heard. Maybe just, so from municipality level, of course, it can have an impact from company level, investor level, but maybe one last question for you, Eva. On an individual basis, what can people do?
I mean, one of the things that I generally say is that the most powerful thing you can do individually is consider where you spend most of your time. Like the job that you have, consider, are you contributing through that work fundamentally to a linear economy, to a fossil economy, or to a regenerative economy that you want to be building? That's the most important vote I think you have. It's more important than your money. It's more important, voting with your actual votes is important, and voting with your money is also important, but also consider where you're voting with your time and energy. And I think if we all do that properly, then we start to shift the economy at scale in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I'm afraid that we have to wrap up this part of the session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Please
you.
give them a big round of applause. Eva Gladek and Martijn Lopes Cardozo. That's way too short for those two super experts. So, but unfortunately, we have to move on to the third part of this session, because that's what we always want to do, right? To move on. And if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And if you don't believe me, then I will invite two people who live by this expression, who had a successful collaboration. So give a big round of applause for Luna Aslan from NOOSA and Paul Guinard from NOLT. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Nice to have you on stage. Luna and Paul, actually you met here at ChangeNOW in 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exciting, no? And you have a successful collaboration. Maybe, Paul, I will start with you. You are the co-founder and managing director of NOLT. You're a teamwear brand, so you produce sports shirts and shorts, for example.
And socks.
And socks, yes. You're very excited about socks. Okay, so how come? Why did you start your company?
Hi everyone. We started NOLT in 2020. The entire idea of NOLT is in the name. NOLT means nothing is lost, kind of means. So nothing is lost is all about circularity. So what we do is we recycle waste. The very beginning was to use basically plastic waste to make, as you said, teamwear. I think the most significant teamwear is a football jersey. So we started like that in 2020. 5 years, so fast forward, 5 years after, we are equipping 1,000 teams with the same idea of recycling waste. Today we are recycling socks, football jersey, to remake football jersey and socks. So we kind of, it's not over yet, but we are on a good way to nail it, to recycle polyester, to recycle socks, which is a big thing. Teams in the world are used to buy jersey every single season. And our entire point is, this is not possible. This is not possible. So we are making football kits, rugby, basketball, volleyball.
All types of sports.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. And then at a certain point you met Luna. Luna, you're the founder of NOOSA, and you're doing some interesting experience in your company.
Exactly. So we met in 2022 when we were here exhibiting as a solution. So at NOOSA we create textile fiber made from sugar, for which we've developed the technology to make it 100% recyclable at the end of life. So that brands, such as Paul, would put our fiber and material into their end product so that we can recycle it at the end of life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you were fascinated by the technology because actually NOLT became a customer of
Yes.
NOOSA.
Yeah.
Yes, you were fascinated.
I was fascinated. I'm still.
So could you maybe just tell a little bit about the technology? You patented, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you have a shirt and then it goes into a mixer and then
Yes.
maybe you can tell it better than I.
Yeah. So we start from sugar to then create a textile fiber, yarn that would then be transformed into fabrics, end products, and so on. And at the end, we also do the recycling. So we developed a chemical recycling technology that we patented that enables us to recycle at 100% a textile because we isolate our fiber from any type of component. So any other material blend, any dye, any pigment, any chemical treatment, we're able to just isolate it to only recover the virgin material and recreate the textile product again and again and reach full circularity in textile.
Mm-hmm. It's something completely, you said, so it's sugar is the basis, it's something completely different than polyester, which is present a lot, especially in fast fashion, and polyester, the burden on society is quite high, right?
Yes.
What are the main problems with polyesters?
I think so. Today, we got used to polyester for a lot of application, and we're not ready to shift from it, despite the urge to do so. For example, any sport products, any yoga pants, any army equipment, you cannot substitute it with linen, for example. The problem is that today there's not a lot of solution where you do not compromise performance or quality. And this is what we try to bring with NOOSA. We bring an alternative to petrol-based materials without compromising performance or quality and already tackling the end of life, making it 100% recyclable. Second problem with polyester in our case is that it emits a lot of microplastic, which is a big topic today, because we're all concerned in the room from a health perspective. In our case, microfibers made from NOOSA fiber are non-persistent in your body. They are biodegraded and digested by your body.
Mm-hmm.
This was perfect.
But if I understood well, the jerseys and the shorts you made, they're from recycled polyester.
Yeah, indeed. So what we do is we're making all our stuff in Europe, and the base is PET, so a plastic base, or plastic waste base, post-consummation. This is very key for us. But she's right. The headache of making sports garment is the entire industry is used of polyester, and its polyester properties are very good for sports. So the entire idea is to change the habits, but we cannot go back in the past and use a cotton-made football jersey. Nobody wants that. So what we're doing is to keep the performance mindset, because you will never make a football jersey for Mbappe made in cotton. No chance. So the goal of our project around circularity is to make as good or even better product in terms of performance. And in the meantime, keeping in mind that what are we going to do of this product at the end of the season, sometime at the end of the game. Pro teams are wearing jersey, 1 or 2 per game. So this is not going in the good direction. And this habit is not helping the message we are doing. So basically, the socks, the football socks we are making together are the very first socks in the world that we can recycle fully. This is the first time, and we are a very small brand, but we are still making 10,000 pairs per season. 10,000.
The lifespan of a sock is not very long. I understand.
You know the name.
It can
it's
sometimes
nothing.
be just one day at most.
Yeah.
In sports terms, just one day.
You know what? Because football players love to cut it here. They are cutting it to wear different socks and only the top of the socks. And this is a killer. Nobody can do anything of that. So those habits are the first challenge.
Yeah.
But our goal as a brand is first to help, to give solution. I will not go to each and single teams and say, stop cutting your socks. My goal is to bring solution, and then I will push by different means, like me being here today, to say, I'm sure we can change this. But trust me, Sandy, it takes time.
Yeah.
I know we don't have time, but it takes time.
It takes a lot of time, but you collaborated, and then you said, okay, so the jerseys we make, we really want another product as well, so those became the socks. And Luna, you have 2 kind of socks here, but they look a little bit different. So this is before and after the process, right?
It's actually the same socks. You have the initial one that is made 90% with NOOSA fiber and 10% elastan, because I think you like compression in sports. And then this is after NewCycle, our recycling technology, where you only have the elastan share left. So the 90 other % were put back into a virgin sock again, and we're able to isolate the elastan that is today the biggest problem in the textile industry, and then revalorize it with elastan producer, for example.
Yeah.
And this can be done again and again. And the idea of putting it in a sock was the super short lifespan, as Paul just explained. So think of any sport product, it's maximum 1 season. Second is that it enhances also the properties of the fiber, meaning super good breathability and also a very good like sweat management, low odor retention, that made sense to put it in this application.
Mm-hmm. So 90% of the original sock you can process and you can reuse, and just the 10%, the stretching element, actually the stretch, that you cannot fully close the
But that's the
cycle
reality of the textile industry, is that no product is 100%. Even when you hear that a cotton t-shirt is 100%, you will have the stitching thread in polyester, you will have the tag, you will have the buttons. So you need to find solutions that can also isolate other elements, and this is what we do. If you make that sock 100%, we recycle it 100%. If you put buttons and zipper on it, we can just isolate it and revalorize several streams.
Mm-hmm. With those socks, how much you're pioneering with it? You're working together with a football team or several football teams. I understand. So how does it work? Do you just sell them, or is it a leasing model?
It's not yet a leasing model. It's coming. The whole idea of being fully circular is to help people to stop buying. Our goal is to say to the teams that you guys are wearing football, rugby, or cycling jersey every single season. So just send it back to me, and you pay a subscription, like any kind of leasing, and I'm taking care of recycling it, not every season, because the idea behind is say, also stop to change shirt every season, makes no sense. Mm-hmm. So today what we do, we're not yet to the leasing, because to be in the leasing, you need to be fully circular for your entire collection of products. Today we're good with the socks.
Yeah.
Well done, Luna. We're not good yet with the jersey. The jersey and the jersey are made in polyester. Polyester is a challenge. So we managed to recycle jersey to make yarn. So we have yarn made of old jersey. Now we need to make out of those polyester yarn new jersey. This is the goal for this year. So let's say in 2 years' time, I will be able to do some leasing model for my key teams. Today what we do is we sell the jersey and we give we give a discount for the next orders if they send back the jersey. So one team out of 4 is doing it. It's not enough, but as I say, it takes time. It's a logistic process. I've seen TerraCycle just before. I think everybody knows now it's all about the logistic of collecting. The challenge of what we're doing, we have a few challenges. The collecting is a challenge.
So logistics is definitely a challenge. Maybe because we almost have to end the session. What are the biggest challenges, according to you, Luna, for in the textile industry and especially focused on this collaboration?
We need regulatory to move on a bit. Like, we don't have time for that. It takes time, as Paul said, but we definitely we need a push from policymakers to make it possible. If we want like circularity, all the actors have to work together. And I think if a brand such as NOLT, that is like small, French, and so on, is able to do that, I mean, multinationals can also do it. I mean, I think it's quite inspiring with what you're trying to do, what you did actually. But without policymakers, you cannot have that systemic change to reach circularity.
We need strong regulations. I understood that in France it's already the case.
But
in
they
Belgium,
only get
it's
postponed.
less. Yeah.
Like I talk here about like European level, world level, and then like France, Belgium, and so on. They do their own, but it cannot be just postponed. No, it has to be a reality now.
Yeah, they have to implement it. So what would your call to action be for the audience? Very last question. What would
Sorry. It's not to. So my call to action will be just go out and do some sports. This is what we believe. We believe that we are truly passionate about sports. This is what matters. And out of that, many good things will appear. I do believe that if you put your kids outside and just do sports, then you open your mind about anything. And it might happen that you will buy some NOLT jersey.
And that would be an advantage of it for you. Okay, thank you so much, Paul Guinard and Luna Aslan. Give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, Sandy.
We will talk. Yes, circular economy, it's not just only about recycling, it's about leasing, it's about cooperating, about municipalities who implement legislation. So thank you so much for all attending this session and spending your lunchtime with us. If you can't get enough of the topic of circular economy, please join me tomorrow on main stage for a session on circular solutions. I hope to see you all there, and I wish you a very pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.